Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again to Queen Amadai TV presents The Root of All Evil, and also Queen Amadai TV presents True Crimes. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the story of Sylvia Likens, a 16-year-old girl who was tortured and consequently killed by a woman who was supposed to be her caregiver. Now, Sylvia's parents, they didn't have a lot of money, and they had, numerous children. And so they had jobs as carnival workers. So they often had to travel. So during the time that they would travel, they would have to leave their kids, with someone to watch them or whatever. So anyway, before I get all started, I'm going to wait for some more people to tune in. But I also want to remind you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, be sure you click the notification bell, click the word all, so that you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at QueenAShakur, on Instagram at Divine_Goddess_27, on Twitter at DGoddess27, on Brighton and Patreon at QueenAShakur. And also be sure to go ahead and like this video, okay? Please like and share the video so that we draw more people into the algorithm for the viewing. Okay, and also don't forget about my other channels. Queen Amadai TV presents Beyond the Realm, which is a channel about paranormal activity. Queen Amadai TV presents The Root of All Evil, which is about people that do nefarious things for the love of money. People, also True Crimes, this channel, right? And then also Queen Amadai TV presents More Than Meets the Third Eye, which is a channel that basically talks about spiritual things, being in tune with the universe, the pineal gland, and things of that nature. Okay, so let's get into it, because for this story, I actually prepared a PowerPoint. But so I'm just going to give you a little background on the story before I get into the PowerPoint. And I also have pictures of the crime scene and things like that. So the whole thing is, Sylvia Likens, as I said, she was 16 years old. Her mother had, her mother and father had like 3 or 4 children. And so the older sister was married. That was Diana. And then they had Sylvia and Jenny. And they also had a son. Now, Sylvia and Jenny were the ones that they left in the care of a woman named Gertrude Baniszewski. Now, Gertrude had about 7 children of her own. She was not a widow, but she was a divorcee. She had been married multiple times and always ended up in divorce. She was struggling. She had made her money doing little odd jobs, like ironing people's clothes or cleaning for them and things like that. So she needed the extra cash. So basically she had an agreement with Sylvia's father that she would keep Sylvia and her younger sister, Jenny, who at the time was 14, but she agreed that she would keep both of them for $20 a week, okay? $10 a piece for a week, every week over the summer while they were traveling with the carnival. Now, with that all being said, the problem started when the week, I think it was the first week or the second week that the money was supposed to arrive, and the money didn't show up on time. So Gertrude got pretty ticked off, and she took it out on Sylvia and started beating her. And then things just progressively escalated from there. So now this is one of the most nefarious stories, people, of child abuse, okay, at the hands of a caregiver. So I'm going to go to the PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen so you all can see this, because I really want you all to see these crime scene photos, and just so you can see the deplorable conditions and the heinous things that she did to this poor child. Okay, so hello, Susan, Pensacola, Donna, Craig, Marilyn, Susan Butler. All right, Louise, Hiram, Howard is Black, Ryan, Flow Records, Silent D. Okay, so let's get into it, people. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And everyone, don't forget to come in, liking and sharing the video, okay? All right. Okay, here we go, people. Okay, true crime, the torture and murder of Sylvia Likens. Now, this is how Sylvia looked before she was beaten and tortured and all of those things that Gertrude Baniszewski did to her. And this woman here, this is the caregiver who did this. Gertrude Baniszewski. caregiver from hell is what I call her. That's 16-year-old Sylvia. Okay, this is Sylvia's younger sister, Jenny, who at the time was 14 years old. And these are the two that went to stay with this wicked woman. So Sylvia came from a large family. They were poor, and they were from southern Boone County, just northwest of Indianapolis. Now, her father, Lester Likens, had only an 8th grade education and worked a lot of different jobs to make a living. He'd had a laundry route, worked in factories, and even had owned a small restaurant, though it was unsuccessful. Now, he also traveled with carnivals selling food for a concession card. And it was to this work to which he and his wife decided to return in the summer of 1965. So with them going back on the road with the carnival, that meant finding someone to watch over their 4 children. Now, the oldest, Diana, she was grown and already married. And then the 2 boys, Danny and Benny, they were sent to stay with their grandparents. That left Sylvia and Jenny. Jenny was shy and insecure and limped from childhood polio. Sylvia was outwardly more confident and went by the nickname of Cookie. She was pretty, but always kept her mouth closed because when she smiled, she had a missing front tooth. Now, a mutual friend introduced the Likens to Gertrude Baniszewski, then briefly going by the name of Gertrude Wright, who lived in a big rented house at the corner of East New York, and Denny was willing to look after Jenny and Sylvia for $20 a week. Now, this picture right here at the top, this is Jenny, the younger sister who was 14 at the time. Now, these pictures at the bottom, if you see on my left, the picture at the bottom, that is a picture of Sylvia and her mother. And this little boy with Santa Claus, this is a man by the name, or he was a little boy then, but his name is Kyle J. Wood. Now, he knew them. He was friends of their family, so he actually knew them when he was a child growing up. And this is him as he got older, 50 years later, with, I guess that's his wife. But 50 years later, on the 50th anniversary, he wrote up an article about Sylvia and the things that happened to her on a website. And so that's a picture of him. And he was recalling the tragic events that led up to her death. Now, the abuse was carried out not just by the caregiver, the notorious Gertrude Baniszewski, but also by her own children. Some of them were as young as 10 years old, and by other children in the neighborhood as well. Because here's the thing, she was going to get these children, she would invite the children up to her house and get them to do her dirt. She would have them beating Sylvia, kicking her, calling her nasty names and doing all types of things. So for weeks and even months, the torture of Sylvia Likens was casual entertainment, something to do in the afternoon before dinner and favorite TV shows. Now, at least a dozen children participated or at least watched, and none felt sufficiently disturbed to tell their own parents. Other adults occasionally would come to the house, to Baniszewski's house for various reasons, and they saw Sylvia's battered appearance, but yet none of them bothered to make sure she was safe or just to even look into it and see if anything was going wrong. Now, Sylvia herself and her younger sister, Jenny, they had opportunities to tell adults at the church, even though they even had adult relatives that lived nearby. But neither said a word because, as Jenny would later explain, they thought it would only make things worse. Neither could conceive of the possibility that authorities would move in to protect them and remove them from the house and arrest the tormentors. So clearly they were afraid, and I'm quite sure that Gertrude likely had threatened them if they told anything or said anything to anyone, just like child abusers and child molesters always do. Now, this is a picture of some of Gertrude's children, because she herself had like 7 children. Gertrude was already caring for 7 of her own children. Paula, age 17, John, age 12, Stephanie, age 15, Marie, age 11, Shirley, age 10, and James and Dennis, 18 months. Now, the oldest children all had the last name Baniszewski because their father was Gertrude's ex-husband, John Baniszewski. The youngest child, Dennis, had the last name of his father, Dennis Wright. Gertrude said he was in Germany serving in the army. Now, from the beginning, there was a clash between Sylvia and Gertrude's 17-year-old daughter, Paula. And this was the seed that grew in the house during the months of July through October of 1965. And here to my right is a picture of Sylvia at the top with the red hair. And this picture at the bottom is the 17-year-old daughter at the time, Paula. That's Gertrude's oldest daughter. And that's who Sylvia was clashing with. Okay, so then one day, the money order from Sylvia's parents didn't show up on the day that Gertrude was expecting it. So Jenny later testified that Gertrude took us upstairs and she slapped me. And she said, well, I took care of you two bitches for a week for nothing. The money order arrived the next day, but the key had been turned. She'd already beaten them, and it wasn't even their fault that the money didn't come when she thought it was. So she was just waiting for the money. She didn't care anything about them. She had no empathy or sympathy, and she was only doing it purely for the money. Now, Gertrude was frail and underweight, but she had two weapons that she would use for her corporal punishment. She had a fraternity-style paddle and a thick leather belt left behind from her ex-husband, John Baniszewski, an Indianapolis police officer. Now, Gertrude began using the paddle on Sylvia and Jenny for various offenses, such as exchanging soft drink bottles for change at a nearby grocery store. So how stupid was that? She's getting mad because they're turning in soft drink bottles just so they can get the little change that they would give you. And so then when she suspected Sylvia of stealing, she used matches to burn the girl's fingers. Sometimes Gertrude felt too weak from her asthma to discipline the girls properly, so she allowed her 17-year-old daughter, Paula, to do it. Now, nearby neighborhood children began to crowd the home to come and participate in the torture. Now, remember, I told you all before that sometimes people do things when they're in a group or with a mob-like mentality, you know, when there's a bunch of them together that they normally wouldn't even do by themselves. And clearly, Gertrude had gotten these children to start behaving savagely as she was and to start acting in a mob-like mentality. So the children took turns practicing their judo on Sylvia, hurling her against the wall. Some began kicking and beating her. Others extinguished their cigarettes on her skin. And as Gertrude and a gang of teenagers watched, Sylvia was forced to undress in the living room. They made this girl strip naked in the living room and insert an empty Coke bottle into her privates. This is what they made her do. Gertrude allowed this to happen. Now, after the beatings, Sylvia was forced into a scalding hot bath so she would be cleansed of her sins. Doing all this stuff in the name of Jesus. Here they go with that Christian stuff. Some of these devils do. Now, she was severely beaten and burned for wetting her mattress while asleep. And Gertrude decided that Sylvia was no longer fit to live with the rest of the children. Now, near the end, Sylvia was no longer permitted to leave the house. She wasn't even allowed to go outside, people. So she was thrown down into the cellar and locked in and given crackers for food to eat and refused the right to use a bathroom. Gertrude Baniszewski announced to her children that Sylvia was a prostitute and that she's proud of it. So we'll just put that on her stomach. So she took a needle and began to carve the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. Richard Hobbs, a neighborhood boy, finished the etching into her stomach. Now, when Baniszewski realized that Sylvia might be dying, you know, because she was clearly getting weak, she had bruises and, you know, open wounds all over her skin because she got these infections, you know, from living in that filth. There was feces all over that basement, you know, because she wasn't allowed to go to the restroom. And I'm sure her mattress probably had urine on it or whatever, because all she had was an old filthy mattress. And she probably had bed bugs and all kinds of stuff down there, all kinds of parasites. So clearly her skin was infected. And so she looked at her, Gertrude did, and she knew that she was likely going to die soon. Plus, she wasn't feeding her nutritious food. She was giving her crackers every now and then and just a few sips of water. So when Baniszewski realized Sylvia might be dying, she forced her to write a note saying that a gang of boys beat her. The plan was to blindfold her and dump her in the nearby woods with the note. Sylvia tried to escape, but Gertrude and the boys stopped her, beating her again and throwing her back into the basement. The poor child tried to escape because she knew at this point they're going to kill her. because they telling her to write a note saying that somebody raped her and that she, you know, that the boys beat her and all this stuff. So, of course, she eventually died. So after she died, of course, they had the trial, and that was in May of 1966. Now, hold on, people. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, at her trial the following year, Banazuski denied having any knowledge of the torture, claiming that the children must have done it all by themselves. She had nothing to do with it. Those children must have just come in her house and started beating this girl and torturing her and locked her down there in the cellar and not giving her any food. This is what she expected people to believe. Now, she entered pleas of not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. On May the 19th of 1966, a jury found Banazuski guilty of first-degree murder, while Paula Banazuski, the 17-year-old daughter, was found guilty of second-degree murder. And Hobbs, the boy from the neighborhood, whom I believe was like 14 or 15, he actually, along with Banazuski's son John and another neighborhood boy named Coy Hubbard, they were convicted of manslaughter. Gertrude and Paula Banazuski were sentenced to life terms at the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. And the boys were sentenced to 2 to 21-year terms at the Indiana State Reformatory in Pendleton. Now, in 1971, because remember, the trial was in 1976, so this is just a few years later. So in 1971, the Indiana Supreme Court granted Gertrude and Paula Banazuski a new trial due to a prejudicial atmosphere. But Gertrude once again was convicted for first-degree murder on August the 5th of 1971, and then Paula pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and served about 2 more years in prison. Now, the 3 boys were released on parole for good behavior in 1968 after serving 2 years each on their sentences. And then in December of 1985, Gertrude Banazuski was released on parole. She changed her name to Nadine von Fossen and moved to Iowa, where she lived in obscurity until her death from lung cancer on June 16th of 1990. Paula married and moved to a farm on Iowa. Gertrude should have never gotten out. She had a life sentence and she got out in December of 1985 when she just went to prison in 1966. So she didn't even serve a whole 20 years. Now, these are the accomplices. This is her daughter, Paula Banazuski, right here when she was 17. And this is Richard Dean Hobbs, the boy who lived in the neighborhood who helps Gertrude, right here shown next to him. This is these are some of the crime scene photos I'm going to be showing. Now, this is the home that they lived in. This is the steps going down into the cellar. You see it's clearly raggedy, right? Dilapidated. And then right here, you see this old mattress. That's what Sylvia had to sleep on. This was the bathtub and toilet in the basement. Clearly disgusting. And this is so deplorable. Look at this. That's an old mattress. That old mattress, I guess that's the bottom of where she had to sleep. And this is how it looks. There's the mattress over in the corner. This is so disgusting. This is, I guess, where she had to go to use the bathroom, because that's clearly feces. Now, Sylvia died after months of torture and starvation. And this is her when she was, after she died, laying on that old filthy mattress in a cellar. Malnutrition, internal injuries, burns from cigarettes being put out on her, and just filthy. And then there were lies and an attempted cover-up. Because on October the 26th of 1965, Indianapolis police were called to 3850 East New York Street, where Sylvia's body lay on a mattress. Banazuski told them the girl had been attacked by a gang of boys, and she even produced a note written in Sylvia's own hand that seemed to confirm the story. But the cops could tell by the condition of the victim that this had not been a single incident. You see, they were able to tell that it was something more nefarious because she had old bruises on her. You know, old bruises and old scars and wounds that had been there for days and even weeks, some of them. So they knew that was all BS. And what happened was after Sylvia died, Gertrude had the neighborhood boy, Richard Hobbs. She had him go to the payphone and call the police and tell him that this girl, was dead or whatever. And that's why they even came to the house. Now, Sylvia's body was malnourished and covered with sores, burns, and bruises, many of them old. She had been branded in one spot by a hot metal object, and the words, "I am a prostitute," had been etched on her stomach. And here's a picture of her stomach where they carved that into her. It says, "I'm a prostitute," and proud of it. They put the number 3. I don't know what that represented. There's another picture of her. You can see how frail she was. Cause of death, according to the coroner's report, said Sylvia Likens died on October the 26th of 1965. The cause of death was determined to be brain swelling, internal hemorrhaging of the brain, and shock induced by Sylvia's extensive skin damage. She was only 16 years old. And this is Paula Beniszewski. This is a picture of her when she was 17 at the time of the crime and her participation in it. And this is her years later. Now, on October the 24th of 2012, remember, she moved to Iowa and lived in obscurity and changed her name to Nadine Fawson because she didn't want anybody to know who she was and what she had done. But on October the 24th of 2012, an Iowa teacher's aide, this is what was reported in the news media. An Iowa teacher's aide, that would be Paula Beniszewski, Iowa teacher's aide has been fired from her job following the revelation that she was a member of an Indiana family notorious for torturing and killing a girl in her basement or in their basement in 1965. They said a week ago today, we got an anonymous report that the now Paula Pace was the previous Paula Beniszewski. She was involved in this 1965 murder case in Indiana, and it was a real attention seeker out there, a heinous crime. Grundy County Sheriff Rick Pennington told ABC News. So she was fired from that job immediately upon them finding those things out. So this is clearly a heinous crime, but this is what devils do. Okay? And that's just part of her karma. Absolutely. Her eyes just shows she has no soul behind them. Absolutely, she does not. Okay? So that's just so wicked. And then to think that, and here's the thing. You may ask, how did her family, her parents never find out about this? Well, when the family would call to check on them, because they did call to check on them like once a week. And so Gertrude would stand right over them while they're on the phone, Jenny and Sylvia. So, of course, they would be afraid to say what was going on. And at one point, Sylvia was so weak, she could no longer come to the phone because she couldn't even get up the stairs. So they would just lie and say, oh, she's outside or she's doing this and that. And they would just act like she wasn't at home and have Jenny, act like everything's just perfectly fine. So all so sad, people. All so sad. Anyway, that is the nefarious story of Sylvia Likens, who was tortured to death at the age of 16. And there was a movie made about her. The actress Ellen Page played her, and that movie was really good because it was very accurate as far as the story. And Ellen Page actually resembled Sylvia in the movie, but the movie is called An American Crime. If you haven't seen it, you should. Okay? There's also a documentary about it. She was smirking in that mugshot. Yes, Lee Harv, she was absolutely smirking because she didn't give 0 Fs. She didn't care. They actually thought they were going to get away with it. They figured, oh, we'll just go in here and tell these lies and said somebody took her out and, gang raped her and they beat her up or whatever. And she came back and just killed herself or whatever. That was the story they were going to stick to. They actually thought people were going to fall for it. Susan says, I saw that movie. General Lovature says, I need to see it. Yes, you do. It's really good. Where are the parents at now? They died. I'm sure they're dead because that was like in 1966. The parents were very hurt when they found out that all happened. They blamed themselves. Because, of course, they didn't know. They thought this woman was so nice. And how they even got to know one another is, I believe, Paula was friends with Sylvia, the 17-year-old daughter. She was friends with Sylvia. And let me tell you another thing, too, that they don't mention in the articles. Now, Paula was jealous of Sylvia because Sylvia was more attractive. Even though Sylvia had a missing front tooth, she still looked better than Paula. And then with that all being said, they had gone to a church picnic one Sunday. And so there was a boy at the church that Paula was interested in, but he liked Sylvia. So Paula got upset. And so she was telling her mother, Gertrude, about it. So Gertrude goes back and tells the boy that Sylvia's, she's a prostitute and she has sex with all these people and just said all these filthy things about her, trying to make her look like she's a slut. That's the kind of person she was. What grown person does that to a child? I'm glad you asked. A demon. Okay? That's the kind. So Queen Adia says they showed that in the movie. They love pictures, demonic devils. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So with that I've been said, I'm going to conclude this broadcast. I would like to thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you share, like, and share the video, please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channels if you haven't done so already. Now, I'm not going to be going live on Murder Meets the Third Eye today because I don't have time, but I will be going live on there tomorrow, okay? So with that all been said, don't forget to tune back in at 6 p.m. for your daily vitamin, all right? It's going to be going live at 6 p.m. and I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 doses, okay? 5 doses. So we're going to be talking about the shooting at FedEx. Yes, people. Can you believe it? Another mass shooting. I mean, these mass shootings are clearly happening back to back to back, right? So we have another one. And I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about how Oklahoma has literally given people a license to kill when they've now passed a law that says that if you're out there protesting, well, if someone decides they want to plow through the streets and kill you, just run you right on over. Oh, yeah, it's perfectly fine because they're not going to be charged. So, yeah, that's another thing I want to talk about. Also, I'm going to talk about how the cops arrested and charged this racist devil for trying to fight little black kids. A couple of them were like 7 and 8 years old. And then he tried to run over them in his car. Yes, going to be talking about that and also about the body of a missing black student from LSU. Sadly, her body was found. Okay, she was found dead. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And, oh, also, I almost forgot. Also going to be talking about Adam Toledo, the little Hispanic boy that was killed in Chicago by the police, 13 years old. And they shot him down like he was a dog in the streets. And then they said he had a gun. I saw a still shot of the photo that they took from the body cam, the dash cam or whatever. He didn't have any gun in his hand that I could see. But now they're saying that he had gunpowder residue on his hands. So if you have gunpowder residue in your hands, that means you fired a gun. Now, are they trying to make us think this child shot at them? So we're going to be talking about that at 6 o'clock. So everyone, please make sure that you tune back in. It's 5:30. You have enough time to go get your snacks ready, okay? So with that all being said, thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you all right black in the chats. Don't forget to like and share the video. And until next time, Royals, I will talk to you all again soon.